We're joined today by an incredible scholar, Professor Anthea Butler. Dr. Butler is an associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania because she's fancy, and she's written and published a number of books because she's smart. And she's currently working on two books, one of which focuses on racism in publishing, and another that examines white evangelical racism. And so today's focus will be on understanding what we mean by whiteness and what we can do about white supremacy. But what about Christianity in relation to white supremacy? We hear a little bit about it here and there, but what's the relationship? How would you make sense of that?
It's a huge relationship. Every time you see a white Jesus, you see white supremacy. Full stop. I'm sorry. I have no problem talking about this, because if there's anything that's about white supremacy, it's Christianity. Because Christianity tells you that, if you want to look at the Warner Salmon Jesus, who's got blonde hair and blue eyes, looks like a surfer boy, then that's who you should worship. And it's also in the ways in which we think about patriarchy. If you think about, very conservative Christianity, it's white men who run things. It's not white women. White women benefit from that system within Christianity because they can be the moral avatars, right? But Christianity has a problem. It has a problem in whiteness. And part of that problem is embedded, in something that, Christians don't like to talk about: missionary activity. Let's go save those poor, benighted Africans and Asians and Filipinos and wherever we go, whether we're talking about Protestantism or Catholicism, and let's go give them the message of Jesus Christ and civilization, because those things go hand in hand, right? But the problem is that when people start to think about Christianity outside of a box of whiteness, that's when people get really nervous and start to wonder, well, is that really Christianity? Was Jim Cone really right to talk about a Black theology and Black power? These are the kinds of questions we have to ask. I mean, Christianity can be appropriated in lots of different ways, but the ways in which it's been used to appropriate whiteness is I would say, very egregious. What my book is about is telling you that racism has been at the foundation of white American evangelicalism, period, full stop. From slavery, when people believed in the Bible that Black people were enslaved because they were part of the curse of Ham, to the kinds of missionary activity that, basically denigrated Native American and African American communities, to the kind of, gentle, light racism of Billy Graham, when he says, oh, I will go and appear with the very racist Texas governor, and not care that Martin Luther King asked me not to do so, to that racism of him being on the tape with Nixon talking about Jews. I mean, all of those things are part and parcel of American evangelicalism. And I think that a lot of evangelicals want to give themselves a valorous history rather than the history that they really do have.
It sounds like anyone who's read up on the subject shouldn't be surprised by what's happening right now.
No, but I think people are, because evangelicals have cloaked themselves in morality. They basically said, oh, we're pro-life, we are for the family, we don't want a lot of excessive spending, and we want, a righteous and just world. Well, they want a righteous and just world with white people running it, specifically white men running it. And so what my book is trying to do is to show you these inflection points, the points in which this racism has really affected A, the history of evangelicalism, and B, the history of what has happened with race in America. So I'll give you a very short example I think that is worthwhile talking about. Bob Jones University, which is a fundamentalist university, the reason why we think about the manner in which the religious right came to be, we think about it because we think that it was about abortion. Well, that's partially true, but the real energizer was that Bob Jones University didn't want to let Black people in, namely Black men, because they didn't want interracial dating, essentially. And they got their tax exemption taken away from them in the 70s because of this. And so that was where lots of evangelical Christian schools, who were all white in the South, decided that what we call segregationist schools, decided that they needed to start to advocate because they wanted to keep segregation going. It's the same reason why you see this charter school thing comes up. This is about segregation. Let's go put all these Black kids over here. Let's keep these white Christian schools for our kids and nobody else, right? So there's all these different ways in which, racism has affected American evangelicalism. You have to start to think about, what are the things that evangelicals say that don't line up with what they claim they believe? And how do we parse that out? I think, evangelicals, unfortunately today, especially in America, can't look at themselves outside of the political realm because they have embedded themselves so deeply within the Republican Party. Even the ones who don't want to be there, it's hard for them to differentiate themselves from these other evangelicals who've decided to go a political route and use that their beliefs and their whiteness to get the things that they want from the government.
What would you say about mainline Protestants? How does their tradition fit into America's racist past and its present as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think for the main line, there's racism there too. I mean, we can think about how long it took to get, the first Black Episcopal bishop. We can think about the ways in which, the Baptists split, Southern Baptists versus American Baptists, over the issue of slavery. We can think about Presbyterians who had that same kind of split. We can think about the kinds of racial activity that happened with them. Some of these denominations were involved with the civil rights movement, but they too have a racial issue. Okay, it's not just evangelicals. We have to look at churches as a whole. And I will especially pick on my own tradition, the Catholic tradition. If we want to talk about racism in this country, I mean, hello, the Catholic Church, different religious orders own slaves. Right now, Georgetown is trying to figure out how do we make reparations for the slaves that we own, that we sold, so we could keep the school running. There were orders that had slaves. It didn't matter that the Pope said don't have slavery. They sanctioned it. We have plenty of people right now who are, white supremacists right there in the Catholic Church. I mean, some of my earliest experiences of racism were post-Vatican II, when you had the, shake the hand of peace, and we were going to integrated church, and people wouldn't shake our hand because we were Black. And that's in the Catholic Church. So that racism is in all of these religious systems. We can't just focus on evangelicals, but my focus has been, because this is what I do and what I study, has been on American evangelicalism and the Black church and their relationship to African Americans.